Hey everybody, welcome back to Bulk Mythic here on YouTube. What I have in front of me is what I ended up drafting at the first live draft event that I've been to in like 16 months. And man, was it great to get out there, obviously being safe and respecting everybody else's wishes, making sure that we're doing the things that we need to do to stay well in this world. But we still got to sit down and play an 8-person draft pod at one of the local game stores here in my town. It's called Brute Force Games, and they put on a pretty good event. Like I said, it was an 8-player reserved draft just to make sure that we maintained, a respectable number of people in the store. And this is the deck that I came up with. And to tell you the truth, it went pretty well. And by pretty well, I mean I went absolutely undefeated, 6 games straight to go 3-0 in this draft. So let's talk about how this ended up happening. All right, now I'm not going to tell you like there's any big secret or anything like that. We'll go ahead and start with my pack one, pick one. I cracked open here the Priest of Fell Rights, and I could not give it up. Now the one issue that I did have in my first pack was the fact that not only did I have this priest, but there was a tragic slip and the 5-mana black enchantment that gives -5/-5. So I was going to take this and pass 2 very good black removal spells. And I knew I was going to put myself at risk of putting the player to my left into black as well. But I knew if I cut it pretty hard, I think I was going to make it out. I just had to keep my eyes open. And so at that point, it was like, okay, what am I going to do to control what goes into my graveyard so I have some good stuff to recur, as well as paying attention to my curve. So it picked that guy up and started looking around. Another big key to this deck were these 2 Breathless Knights. Having 2/2 flying with lifelink was just so pivotal in so many games. And having that threat of if I recurred a creature, being able to make it even bigger meant that this thing more often than not actually became a target of removal and allowed some of my bigger, even scarier creatures to stay on the board. So that's what I had as kind of the basis of the deck. And then I needed to control what was going into my graveyard. So the way that I did that is I was able to pick up a couple of Vermin Gorgers to sacrifice creatures that I had in play to get value out of that and fill up the graveyard for when I would eventually recur them if I had the opportunity to do so with my priest or with some of my other pieces here. Right. In addition to that, I had Cabal Initiate as a discard enabler, and then being able to sacrifice a creature and explore with the Legion Vanguard just gave me that much more opportunity very early in the game to manipulate my graveyard. And the truth be told, this curve was just so aggressive, even without doing some of the interesting interactions that I'm going to show you here pretty soon. I was able to get many of the games just through good, honest creature combat. All right, but to go along with it, I did get in the third pack a Feast of Sanity, which came in key combined with my Underworld Cookbook so that I could get value out of discarding cards and both getting food tokens and extending that game, as well as draining my opponent out and controlling what was in my graveyard. So a very interesting play that I did have going on was just being able to discard Fairgrounds Patrol into the Underworld Cookbook to get a food and drain a life, and then later being able to get a 1/1 Thopter, because there were a couple of games where having a 1/1 flyer was actually a lot better than having a 2/1 on the ground. So I was able to take advantage of that, as well as Hellbent on Madness on the Hell Mongrel, being able to discard it to one of the outlets and then cast it for a mana cheaper on its Madness. So that was pretty awesome. Believe it or not, the Thraven Watcher, I never ended up casting her. So I was hoping that would come out and really give my deck a little bit of reach, but it never ended up needing it, to be honest. And then kind of looking at the curve, I was like, what else did I have? So the Tizerius Charger, a good discard target so that you could escape it from the yard, and escaping it with a flying counter again really paid dividends in some of the longer grindier games. And then having the opportunity to turn my discard into card advantage was very key. So looking at the rest of the cards in here, I was a little short on removal because I did have to give up, or I did not see a lot of removal after passing some good stuff downstream. But I was able to pick up a Flay Essence and Piercing Rays as key pieces, as well as a Bone Shredder and the Loathsome Curator. So, fun little interaction that I did have is I was able to, after the Loathsome Curator went to the graveyard, I was able to cast a young Necromancer to recur my Loathsome Curator after exiling a couple of lands that I had discarded to the Underworld Cookbook from my graveyard, and then exploit a Fairgrounds Patrol to destroy one of their creatures. And then I went from, I literally spent 5 mana to go from a 2-1 on the battlefield to a 2-3, a 5-4, and destroy one of their creatures. And then I was able to turn that in a later turn into also a 1-1 Flying Thopter creature token. In addition to that, having the Disciple of the Sun, being able to recur a lot of really key pieces with the Charger could recur from it. Both of my Knights could recur from it. Vermin Gorger could recur from it. This thing, when I put together, I wasn't sure if it was going to do what I wanted it to do, and it absolutely did. Like in the quick games, it was highly aggressive and everything like that. In the longer, grindier games where my opponent had some removal to kind of keep me on my toes in the beginning, it really grounded out. The Marble Gargoyle, to be honest, is just in there for curve considerations. Early in Pack 2, I was a little bit worried that I wasn't going to have enough creatures because of some of the tricky stuff that I was picking up. And turns out that there wasn't anybody at the table that was just all in red-white Arcbond. So what I ended up being able to do is pick up some of the Arcbond creatures, and I picked up the Marble Gargoyle just to kind of have a side synergy with those. And then after I started deck building, or later on in the pack when I was able to pick up like Fairgrounds Patrols and things like that, the Vermin Gorgers, I ended up not needing them and they ended up in my sideboard. But the Marble Gargoyle was just a good, again, flyer. Evasion is key in the set, and being able to pump its toughness if I ended up on my heels was a big deal to me. One little combat trick here in the Blacksmith skill. We already talked about these two, and that leads me to the last card. All right, so Pack 1, Pick 1 was the Priest. Pack 2, Pick 1 was Cabal Coffers. And I was already certain I was absolutely in black. I wasn't too sure if I was going to be in white, but it was looking that way. So I went ahead and grabbed the Cabal Coffers. I probably could have picked up a better card out of that pack, but I figured it was kind of a free play, seeing I was going to be at like 9 or 10 swamps in the deck. Now, playing it out after that, I did find out that in all reality, it wasn't. So if I didn't already have 3 swamps on the battlefield, playing this land was not even a mana positive play. It didn't even count as making a single mana for itself. And that only came up one time in the last round, and luckily it didn't matter too much. I just had to hold the Cabal Coffers in my hand for a couple of turns, and then eventually I was able to play it out. And I don't ever think I made it to 3 swamps in that game, but I was able to do a lot of other broken stuff. The other issue that I have with the Cabal Coffers, and why you probably don't want it in limited, even though it's a very valuable card if you're going to draft it. I mean, it can pay for your draft in some cases, but it also paints you into the corner of having, if you're going to use it, you have to use it with at least 3 other swamps in play. And that means 2 swamps, and the Cabal Coffers are going to generate 3 black mana. So you need to have the ability to spend at least 3 black mana when you go to utilize the Cabal Coffers. So that did change my play in a couple of the games. I had to time my spells a little bit differently, sequence them a little bit differently, but luckily it wasn't too detrimental. It did only ever, in reality, make 1 more mana for me. I never did get like an honest ramp out of it by having more than 3 swamps in play during my games, but I think that had a lot more to do with how quickly they ended than it did to do with it. So you want to use a bit of caution. It's a fun card to have. It's nice to be able to put it down on the table when you're at a draft and make it work in your deck, but it does have a lot of constraints in limited. You really need to be very heavy in black. I think my My land set that I ran in this was 9 swamps and 7 plains, along with the Cabal coffers. So this was the only non-basic land that I had, and it was okay. I lucked out, probably not pinning myself into a corner more often, and had a really good time drafting this deck. So again, had a lot of very interesting synergies. The recursion was great. The removal was awesome. Being heavily black actually blanked one of my opponent's bone shredders in the last round too, and it just goes to show with the mana fixing in this set. Yeah, you can play 3 colors, you can play 4 colors, you can get kind of greedy with all the artifact dual lands and things of that nature. Even some fetches if you get lucky enough to pull some of those in a draft, but you can still just draft an honest 2 color deck, very simple mana base with a good curve and some amazing synergy, and go to town. So just want to share that with you all. Had a blast there. Make sure you're paying attention to the channel if you're liking this kind of stuff. I'm hoping to do a lot more of it now. I'm getting out there and playing live Magic, and maybe even doing some gameplay videos with Spell Table or Arena. And if that's what you want to see, leave a comment below, let me know. Like this video, subscribe to the channel for more, and be paying attention, because the next video coming up is going to be cracking open this guy right here that I picked up while I was down there at Brute Force Games. In addition to that, I also had the opportunity to grab a few more of these Jumpstart packs. So we got at least one video, if not 2 videos, out of these, and we'll be talking more Jumpstart there as we go along. And also, not even trying to leave the best for last, but I do have a set booster box of Modern Horizons 2 ready to open too. So a lot of great things coming on the channel. Make sure you're paying attention. Find us on Facebook so you can see when I post these videos up. Hit the subscribe button and ring the bell as well to get those notifications. And we will see you a little bit later on, because we're out there sharing our hobby together.